Hi, this is Michael Waitze and welcome back to the Thailand GameChanger. We are focused on the driving forces behind the startup ecosystem in Thailand and Southeast Asia, produced by True Digital Park in conjunction with Michael Waitze Media. We have the most informative and insightful conversations with startup founders, venture capitalists, ecosystem builders, and senior leaders from tech giants and the government, all recorded live at the Beach City studio at True Digital Park. I am joined today by Tommy Mazenc, investment manager at the True Corporation. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Michael.
It's my pleasure. Can you just give us a little bit of your background for context?
Sure. So actually, I was born in Thailand, then I grew up in France, and I did my undergrad in Canada, and basically came back here to work.
So you're a French speaker?
Yes. So my first language is French.
Great.
And I had to work my English. So, part of the reason I think going to Canada was actually to get more exposure outside and perfect my English and, get a better understanding of the...
I don't hear any tinge of any accent in your English.
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much. I'm working hard on this. Yeah.
I do the same thing. For those of us that are multilingual, right, we try really hard to do that. Anyway, what are some of the challenges that you face as sort of a well-known and a prominent investor in Thailand?
I think one of the... As us in corporate VC at True, we really look for synergies between the startup and the corporation. Right. I think it's being able to map out synergies in certain ways where we have to find a win-win situation for the startup and the corporation. And that's a challenge where I think the corporation has to adapt to a startup mentality. But the startup has also to be able to work with a corporate mindset. So it's a bit of two worlds we try to put together. Right. And I'll tell you later how we do that, how we find ways. But I think that this is the biggest challenge because I think in both ways we have a lot of potential. I think corporation has a lot of untapped potential. I think startup can also contribute a lot. They're a big enabler for us. Right. But I think it's really how we can find ways into creating that synergy.
So this is a really interesting word, enabler. A lot of hype around startups being disruptors.
Yeah.
Right. I like this term enabler, and I feel like to separate them into those two categories because the enablers, I think, are the ones that are really going to succeed because they're solving real problems for real companies and real people. What are those extra challenges that you were talking about, and even some of the benefits of being at a CVC as opposed to being a sort of a LP-funded VC company?
A great question. I think what is very interesting with corporate VC is, we have the corporation behind us. Right. Basically, the corporation is backing us in our efforts. Right. And what can we do with that corporation, like, True, which is also under CP, is we have a lot of great people. We have a lot of experts. What we're trying to do is we bring those experts with us, actually, in those, discussion with the startup when we do the due diligence. Mm-hmm. So what we usually do is for each business unit, we identify a person that has worked with startup before or are used to, understand this kind of mentality. Right. We call them business unit champions, right? So we bring them with us when we meet some startups and we start doing the proof of concept. I think that helps a lot because when it gets very intense into some technical terms, when there is ways that us as VC we might not say that way, I think the BU champion can, and that's in which way I like the fact that as we work at corporate VC, we can use all those knowledge and create something together.
What kind of feedback do you get from the startups, right? They must perceive you and all CVCs differently than they do perceive these LP-funded venture capitalists. What kind of feedback do they give you?
I think mostly for, when we compare with usual VC is that it's a big corporation, so there's always I understand a bit of concern on, how corporates work, what are their KPIs, how will be the collaboration down the years, and we totally understand, those concerns, and we actually, with this BU champion mentality, we're trying to create a safe environment for them where actually they can strive, and of course, not everything goes well all the time, right? But we're trying to at least assess each month or 2 months on how things are going with the business unit. Is there any obstacles, things we can do actually? Right. So I think it's a lot of, we have to be very hands-on with them. It can't be we invest, we sit and we wait to see the progress, right? So as we feel that in some ways we can drive value for them, we really need to be active. And I think this is the best way into see if reassure them, see everything is going right, or if there is things that they don't feel comfortable, but it's really hard to talk to the business units. So.
Right. So let me ask you this. One of the things that you mentioned is there's a speed difference, right? And a KPI difference between what a corporation's trying to achieve and what a startup's trying to achieve, particularly in the speed space, right? How do you, what do you tell the startups? What kind of advice do you give to them when you start to work on a POC or a proof of concept about how to deal with the corporate and vice versa?
I think it might sound very basic, but I think the first thing is actually set your goals. Set your goals with them. What is the expectation? Sometime, we're very excited about the POC. We start right on, but then we lose kind of the main goal of all of this. What we're trying to accomplish here.
Right.
I think it's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, I think we figured out, the expectations, what we try to accomplish. Right. Now is what kind of, we call it special projects KPIs. Okay. So actually it's KPIs that are catered to this kind of collaboration.
So it's separate from their other KPIs.
Yes, separate.
Okay.
And this is not like KPIs that we put on top of the business unit. It's basically KPIs that will help the main KPIs.
Right.
So those are usually those KPIs are being discussed with the startup and the business unit right at the beginning. So they agree on that. And if, let's say, in 2-3 months this is not going the right way, then we reassess and let's call it modify, edit the KPIs. So I think this is one of the way we do in order to foster that collaboration.
And do you find that the people inside the corporation, inside the business units that are determined to be the champions, they must be very excited about doing this, right? Sort of separate in a way from their regular job.
Yeah.
How do they feel about doing this?
I think there is a lot of interest, even more than we thought. Really? And I would say actually even from traditional business units, right?
That's awesome, right?
Yeah, it is great because I think, okay, we talk a lot about digitalization, corporate innovation, all that, but I think they really feel it now. I think they realize that there is a lot of good contribution. I think one point that really helps is we've done some investment that really helped the company. And I think those has been some very good use case. And success stories.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So actually, one of them is SystemStone. So SystemStone is industrial IoT. They do predictive maintenance.
And wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. They were actually our batch alumni, I think batch 2. Okay. So that was 3-4 years ago. And they basically serve 28 manufacturing plants at CPF now. And I know we don't hear much about it, but I think it's a very interesting B2B play. And I think it's one of the first startups CP Food actually start working with them.
Right.
And I think the other business unit realized, wow, this is really helpful. They help reduce the downtime. They actually analyze all of our machines. It's a platform on the mobile, so it's very convenient. You can use it everywhere, and but this is one of the success stories. And I think they realized that they help this business unit. They could also help ours. I mean, with other startups, other ways. So yeah, that's one of them.
Do you think there's a facility or the opportunity for a company like this? So an IoT company that does systems maintenance or facilities maintenance, right? It's very important. Every company, not just CPF, not just CP at the parent level, could benefit from this. Does that startup have the ability to then sell that service or product to people outside of CP as well?
Yeah, for sure. So actually,
because that's a gigantic potential market, right?
it's huge. I think it is very scalable. So they work with CP Food, but they work also with I think Yokigawa, the Oishi company. They recently have a partnership with Bosch.
Okay.
So
Makes
interesting
sense.
partnership because Bosch serves a lot of big companies, but they also have smaller companies in their portfolio, and this is where SystemStone came off as cheaper solutions and a solution that we can apply directly. So that's one of those ways, and I think they're looking into expanding, right? So I think it's an application that can be used in a lot of areas.
Very interesting. I want to get to expansion later. We talked about it before we started recording, but I want to jump to another thing that you kind of alluded to. How do you see partnerships with other venture capitalists, whether they're CVCs or, like I said, LP-funded venture capital companies, when it comes to sort of co-investment or sharing due diligence? How do you build those relationships, and what are the outcomes that you expect?
I think those partnerships are actually very important. I think we all are actors of the ecosystem. I think we have to work together.
Right.
I think in those ways, how can we do that is I think how I view the other corporate VCs and VCs is they really help us get that product validation.
Right.
You know, when we look at their portfolio, we usually exchange our portfolio ideas, and they have some really great views. I think it's really good because maybe sometimes we only have this view, this mindset, but when we talk with them, we have some other ideas, some other views. I think, for example, if we want to invest in Singapore, we necessarily not have a footprint there. Talking with some other VCs, that really helps, right. and vice versa with them. I think the other corporate VCs great because they also have the corporate backing them, mm-hmm. but they have a different view, a different mandate, and it's great to see in which way they're doing that. And us as the next round investor, can we join? Can we give value? So that those are the ways we're doing that.
So you just bring up another really good point. Do you invest across all stages? Is it more early stage? Will you do a Series A or a Series B as well?
Great question. So we say that we're early stage investors. So it's seed to Series A.
Okay.
But the thing is, if we feel there is a lot of synergy and strategic angles,
right.
then we can look further. We can look Series B maybe.
Okay.
And the check size is usually $300K to $3 million.
Okay.
But we can go a bit further if there is again a good synergy point. Yeah.
Right. Do you want to talk a little bit about True and Cube and where that fits into sort of the investment strategy, but also the incubation strategy?
Sure,
as well?
Sure. So True and Cube has an incubation part and a corporate VC part. So for the incubation part, I think the idea here is to nurture very young startups, and we usually sometimes we feel out, the corporation kills a startup, and that in some sense that's true. And what we're trying to do with True and Cube is actually show them that it's not the case. We can really nurture something.
Right.
And part of our program is basically link the business unit and the startup since the beginning. So it's a bit a different approach where we let the business unit choose a startup. We're not the one. So we're the one screening, bringing let's say maybe 20 or 30 startups.
Right.
The business unit get to see them and then choose which one they want to work with in a program.
Okay.
So the program spans for 3 to 4 months.
Oh, really?
And the business unit just, view them and say, okay, I think this one we could do something. The goal is not to create a product. I think it's really to work together, find ways to collaborate. If this is really going well, we feel that, okay, this is, this makes a lot of sense. The startup likes working with them. Then we start to look into a serious commercial agreement. And then us as corporate VC, we would invest in them later on.
Got it. And would you invest in companies where there's not necessarily a synergy with the larger corporate entity, but where you just think the business itself is so compelling?
So the thing is, that's this kind of case happen sometimes. Mm-hmm. Our main mandate is really a synergy. So okay. It's either they might have synergy later on, but you really have to convince the top management on that.
Got it.
But I think the synergy is really the foundation. So okay. I think we came across really good, very interesting startup, but we couldn't really invest in them because
couldn't figure out how they were going to be connected.
We couldn't justify, but we still keep an eye on. And if we feel that maybe in the next stage there is now synergy that could be open, new applications or verticals,
right? And
we would come back in.
So are there specific sectors where you or the company actually has deep interest, where you're desperately looking for? Pick a vertical, but things like that?
Yeah, I think usually we like to look, broad because there is, I think there is a lot of interest in tech that could apply. But if we have to pick some verticals, I would say big data. So data analytics. Data analytics, why? Because, telco has a lot of unstructured data. And I think that,
right.
Data
unstructured is a really interesting point, but
yes.
Go ahead.
And I think that, the data analytics startup can actually really help us structure that data, right. Leverage it, make a better use of it. And so it's one area we look into a lot. I think IoT is another one, but again, IoT is a big word.
Right.
So we're trying to find IoT. Right now it's more towards the consumer based, but we're also looking for B2B IoT. So how can we actually collect data points everywhere? And I think then that touch maybe more CP as well. So for, the agriculture, the livestock.
Right.
So IoT is also an important point. The other one I'd say is we like to look into deep tech. But in deep tech, we like to look into any solutions that actually can enhance the customer experience.
Okay.
I think one of them is we talk a lot about AI, but
I was going to ask you, but go ahead.
So AI and chatbot, why? Because for customer service, we're trying to enhance the experience for them,
right?
And we're trying. Right now the chatbot state is, or the voice recognition is, for example, when you ask 2 questions in one sentence, so they sometimes get confused, right? So
it confuses humans.
Yeah, also,
right.
and we actually wanted to perfect that, make it better, and we're looking, for example, at some AI algorithm machines that can understand different languages, but they can also learn on themselves. That they can actually have some kind of machine learning capabilities.
Got it.
Because there is, in different language, right? Even in Thai, there is the words can mean different things in different contexts.
Sure.
So we're trying to map that out, and those are areas we look into as well.
Right. I always think of the word red. Right. I read a book. That sweater's red.
Yeah.
Even that stuff's hard
That's
to
true.
teach. So let's get a little bit more general. What do you think is the current state or the status of the startup ecosystem in Thailand, if you had to sort of generalize about it?
I think, I guess there is a lot of different views on that, but I guess my 2 cents is...
Can I have 3 cents?
Oh, sure. we can even do 3 cents. I feel right now there is good points and bad points. Okay. I think like the good points are we're starting to evolve into really understanding the market outside. I think that
outside of the country.
Yes. Okay. So for example, Vietnam, Indonesia are having a lot of influence on us. For example, Get coming here, other startups are getting in the area. I think we realize that we really need to move forward. We have to move faster. I think there is this sense of being faster. I think one of the bad points is when we think about regional expansion. Mm-hmm. I think there is not. Most of the time there is not clear strategy on, we're gonna go to Vietnam, we're gonna go to Indonesia,
right?
But it feels that that's a good idea, but how can you gonna do it? Right. Who are you gonna talk with? How are you gonna implement yourself? How are you gonna win the customers? How do you learn about them? And this is where there is not much. And the thing is, and this to another point, for example, when we talk to some startup. Mm-hmm. When they do different raising, right? So they will have the use of proceeds, and one of them is regional expansion. Right. So we want to get deeper into that, and I try to understand how they're going to do it. And the thing is, there's not much there to justify, for example, either the valuation or the amount they seek. So this is one point, and I think for I think one of the other point I think also is for the what's going to be the game changer, right? For that ecosystem. I think one point, and that's one of the good points actually, is we start to see more and more B2B startups.
Right.
And this is something I like, maybe because I'm biased because I work a lot with B2Bs, but we heard a lot about when we're going to have a unicorn. Right? It's always
do you care though, really?
That's a great point. Actually, it's just a term. For me, it's just a term. Yeah. It's just a valuation metric. And I don't think having a unicorn will make things better.
It won't.
I look more for what kind of quality startup we can have.
Right.
How sustainable they are.
So that was the word I was going to use. Yeah. Is like the real question should be, how many sustainable companies can we build from scratch?
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
And I think actually those sustainable companies, right, are the ones that first for me has a business model with clear unit economics. Right. I think this is the other point we don't see enough is unit economics.
Negative gross margins everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
And I think unit economics doesn't to be that precise, but it still have like a clear sense of how you're going to structure that. I think it's really helpful.
Very.
And again, I think as we look into B2B, I think that when we ask often where the next unicorn will be, and I can't give like a clear idea here, but I really think if it's gonna at least one's gonna be B2B, at least a B2B startup.
So even the IoT company you were talking about that does systems maintenance or business maintenance or machine maintenance from afar, right?
Yeah.
Have a mobile application that allows you to connect to a factory or someplace somewhere that allows you to see, oh, wait a second, that pipe or that thing is broken or looks like it may break. This is a massive opportunity. And because it's not B2C, it may not feel sexy to people.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be. And of course, there is a lot of B2Cs in Indonesia that are unicorns. But if you look at the market, it's 260 million people. So you can target a portion of that. You already grow your business a lot.
Sure.
But in Thailand I think there is a lot of interesting manufacturing companies. There is a lot of SMEs that can benefit from that.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where for me the market is.
I completely agree with you. And one of the things I like to say is I saw a news story on LinkedIn today, and it said, I want to congratulate one of my portfolio companies for having a $500 million valuation. And I just thought, this is just complete startup hype.
Yeah.
Because that valuation is meaningless unless that company actually has profits, gets listed somewhere, and doesn't fail. The world is littered with companies that had massive valuations that then failed. Doesn't mean anything. I agree with you. The sustainability and the profitability is the better part of it, I think. Yeah,
I agree.
So what do you think is having the most impact on the startup scene in Thailand?
I think right now I think we have to rely on culture. I think one of the really good point about us Thai people is is always this positive mindset. I think positiveness can help or can sometimes endanger, right? Yep. But I think it's always like we always have this positive outlook on, okay, there is an issue, we'll try to fix it. We'll try to make it better.
Right.
It's not, this is done, we're going to push it out. So I think in one way there's this sense that it really helps pushing things out. Sometimes we'll also have to be, realistic. Sometimes it just doesn't work, right? We have to shift. So this is one factor I'd say is the cultural side. The other part is it's the government can have a lot of impact. I think they're slowly starting to do that. Of course, there is a lot of ways they can make it better. Right. I think they're on the right track. I think we're starting to see some.
So where do you think the government fits in?
I think at the end of the day, the government has to be here to facilitate the process.
Okay.
One example, actually, for us CVCs is, and even any kind of investors, is when we want to invest, we usually like to do convertible notes. It's something that we still cannot do here, and it would be great if
Almost. But go ahead. You said it would be great if you could.
But yeah, it would be great if we could, because then it gives more areas for financing options for startup as well.
Absolutely.
And right now we're just using some kind of mechanism that is not tight enough, right? That replicates that, but it's not tight enough.
Right.
And this is one that we would love to see. Yeah. And that's why there is actually a number of Thai startups that incorporate in Singapore.
Right.
So they can actually get that convert note even from investors outside of Thailand. They might get investment from Singapore, for example.
Right.
But that's good. But I think that as a result, right, we see those moving out a bit. But the idea is we want to attract them.
Right.
So I think there's one way they could help facilitate the process of having foreign startup getting here.
Yes.
Also, I think it is very important if we feel that Thai market is attractive, we have to make it attractive to the other startup to come as well. So
right. Yeah. And I think we both agree that it's actually really attractive, and making it a little bit easier, like you said, to incorporate, to do convertible notes and sort of different types of investment schemes would make it easier, not just for local entrepreneurs, but also for foreigners as well.
That's right.
I want to get back to something we talked about earlier. What do you believe in your mind is the right way to build a company? Do you have to dominate first in Thailand and then expand? Or do you think you just kind of get a good foothold and then try to be global from day one? And by global, I just mean have sights on being a global company as opposed to just being a local or regional company.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, naturally, it would be you have to dominate the market first, in a sense that by dominating the market, when you start to implement yourself, you have this feedback loop of customers telling you this and that. You perfect your business model, you perfect your product, you perfect your tech, and you feel comfortable with that. I think then you can start expanding, because if you're here, you have not, you necessarily doesn't need to dominate the market, but you still have to have a very strong footprint there, because as you get to other countries, you have to learn from your mistakes and what happened before.
Fair enough.
So that's why when I look at startups that want to expand, I like to see them already having a clear understanding of this market, this product, and what they're doing. But I think there is some other startup that can do it before dominating. A startup that actually have a very easy solution, an API solution where it fits to any country, right? Like you don't need a lot of ways to adapt. It goes well. But again, I think I'd take the first option where I feel more comfortable having a startup that dominates a market, understands it, learn from its mistake, how they can perfect it, so they can be stronger when they go outside.
Got it. Okay. And the last thing I'll ask you, I think at least, unless you bring up something else really interesting, is you already used the term game changer, right? But just overall, from a general perspective, what do you think is going to change the game in Thailand?
I think again, this is with the corporate bias, right?
Yeah.
Kind of view. But I think it's the moment where the corporates are moving into digitalization, create a digitalization of all of their processes. I think right now the motto is, we look at how we can optimize things, how we can make it better, faster. I think as all the big corporates are moving forward, either by, perfecting their processes or turning their solution into more like enterprise solutions, all those of things, I think will push everything along the way. As we look into these kind of solutions, then they will start to either make acquisitions or work further with startup that answers those pain points. I think there's other point I forgot to mention, but how we work with the corporation, right? With our corporation is when we talk to business unit, we actually look for the pain points. We don't really go out there and find startup and bring it back. We actually, try to see what pain points they have. And if a tech integration, startup collaboration is a solution, then we start looking for startup for them. And I think in the biggest sense, it's the same for corporation as a whole. Right. Like what pain points they are trying to solve, in which way. And I think if of course, tech is one of the solution. And I think as all the corporations are starting to push forwards with that, I think that we'll see a lot of things that will change because more and more company contracts going in with the startups, it will create a lot of value, will create a lot of traction, a lot of demand. And I think this is something we're starting to see evolving. I think big corporation, then you have SMEs that will benefit from that. Right. So I think this is one part. I'm sure there is a lot of different ways, but this is the way I see it from my point of view. But
this just goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about disruption versus enabling, right? Yeah. If you have a real problem that really needs to get solved and technology is at least part of, if not most of the solution, then you go out and find that solution.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Anyway, it's a great way to end. I really want to thank you, Tommy Mazenc, for coming in and doing this. Investment manager at the True Corporation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Michael.
That was super.
Thank you.